Happy Wisdom Wednesday, everyone. So this week's book of the week is a very strategic book, and it's called HardBall. Are you playing to play, or are you playing to win? By George Stalk and Lachenauer. Now, this book reminds me a lot of a classic, The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Now, definitely not the same weight, but essentially it talks about rules of the game that you should probably learn, and even if you don't like them, you better learn them, otherwise someone's going to use it against you. So these two gentlemen advise companies for about 25 years on strategy and have a range of experience picking up on what makes certain companies hardball players. And what it means to be a hardball company means that you're not trying to squeak out a little 2-1 victory over a competition. You're trying to blow them out of the water with a 10-1, 20-1, 100-1 win, right? And one of the interesting things in this book, and it kind of kicks off the theme of what they're getting at, is this quote. Now, Milton Friedman, who's a Nobel laureate, wrote in his book Capitalism and Freedom, and I want to read it directly from the book, and he said, "There is one and only one social responsibility of business, to use its resources and engage in activities designed to increase its profits so long as it stays within the rules of the game, which is to say, it engages in open and free competition without deception or fraud." Now, the founder of the Boston Consulting Group, which is where George Stalk spent a lot of his career at, Bruce Henderson, really loved this, but emphasized an even bigger focus on competition. And so this book really pays homage to the tradition that Bruce and Milton and others believe in when it comes to playing hardball. So, when it comes to playing hardball, the biggest thing is that the best companies, they're not families, right? Because you love your family members, you put up with them, but they're teams in the sense that they hold each other to a very, very high standard. And if those standards aren't met, there are consequences for it. So, business are full of all types of great companies, but the best ones, they function like that, and they function as hardball players. And I put together a list of their 5 principles of hardball. I'm going to walk you through so you start to understand what it means to be a hardball player and how you can start deploying that with your team. Now, let's start with this. Focus on a competitive advantage. Now, a lot of companies, they focus on a competitive advantage, but they don't exploit it. Here's a great example of one. Walmart. Walmart focused on a competitive advantage of moving to rural areas and really dominating the markets there. As they dominated the markets, increased the revenues, they used the revenues to start bending and gaining more support and authority with suppliers. And from that, of course, they started rolling everyday low prices. You use your competitive advantage and you amplify it. The second one, convert the competitive advantage into a decisive advantage. A decisive advantage means that your competitive advantage became so powerful and you're ratcheting it down, becoming so good at it, your competitors can't keep up. Toyota is a great example of this. Toyota has the Toyota production line, and they got so good at ratcheting that up that nobody could catch them. And just so you know, in terms of the world automobile market share, Toyota has been number 1 for the last, 20, 30 years. Number 3, employ the indirect attack. Now, some people think it's good to directly attack your competitors. If you look at any military history and strategy, they say the indirect attack is most important. Look at Southwest Airlines. Rather than going into the major airline hubs in the cities, they decided to focus on secondary and tertiary markets, such as Baltimore, Washington Airport. And they started to own those markets, and they grew their company from there. It's an area where, of course, their competitors weren't there. And you can think of this a lot like the category formation in market engineering that I talked about last week with Bruce Cleveland's book, Traversing the Traction Gap. Number 4, exploit your employees' will to win. There's this famous saying by an Air Force pilot named Jimmy Doolittle who said, "Those who want to win and who believe that they're going to win will essentially end up winning." And it's probably not like that. It's somewhere close, but you get the point. When you find the way to exploit the will to win among your employees, they will find ways to drive towards that. And you can turn softball players into hardball players. And more importantly, you got to focus on what's the main goal for the company. How do we get there together? And not focusing on like hierarchy and quarrels and all these kind of things. It's driving towards a common goal together. And lastly, know the caution zone. So what is the caution zone? It's that bright line that society puts down and says, hey, on this side of the line, you can play and do business stuff over here, but over here, this is not acceptable. Now, it's very easy to find that line when it comes to, let's say, what's legal and illegal. But when it comes to morally and ethically and socially acceptable behavior, sometimes that line gets blurred. For example, maybe even though it's legal, your company decides that, hey, we're going to find a way to buy out our distributor and supplier and really screw over our competition. Well, that's a great way to buy a new enemy who's going to be passionate about finding a way to screw you over in the long run. So those are the 5 principles of HardBall. It's a fantastic book. I definitely recommend getting it, reading it with your team, and more importantly, thinking about how you can start deploying your competitive and decisive advantages. And I think that a lot of companies, that's the best place to start, is to sit down and say, what's our competitive advantage to the marketplace and with our product? And how do we turn that competitive advantage into, more importantly, a decisive advantage, that as we grow and we become better and better at this, we have this decisive advantage. One great example of that is the use of data and algorithms in the marketplace. So that's your book of the week. Happy Wisdom Wednesday, and as always, I'll see you next week.